This is the continuance of our series into the life of Job. We'll go in a bit more into depth in this. I'm finding this fascinating, and as we've looked into it, and I'm enjoying it as we go that wee step at a time. I mean, these aren't big, long videos; they're just small steps. But it's fascinating to see how the things are developing. Last time we looked at Job and we talked about those things that had befallen his family. We talked about the things that had happened to his livestock and how he was reduced and how he had blow after blow after blow against him. And then that line had come up, which we'd read last time. It said, "In all this, Job did not sin nor charge God with wrong." What a real testimony to who Job was and to what his relationship with God was and his understanding of God. This time, as we go into the next stage. And we start to look at how things affected Job's body and how his relationship even with his wife. We'll look into that. But in this one here, I want to start with introducing a word. It is the word hupomone. Hupomone. It is endurance, steadfastness, especially as God enables the believer to remain under the challenges and the things of life and the struggles of life. It is patient enduring. This is a New Testament word, and in the New Testament it is the characteristic of a man who is unswerved from his deliberate purpose and his loyalty to faith and piety by even the greatest trials and sufferings. Let's read that part again. Unswerved from his deliberate purpose and his loyalty to faith and piety by even the greatest trials and sufferings. Very appropriate word for this discussion, very appropriate word for even us looking at the life of Job and how he's enduring these hardships. As we know in this third section, what happens is the scene changes from the family and from his loss and from his grief and his heartache. The scene now changes back to the heavenly realms, back to the spiritual realm. And here in the throne room of God, the enemy is again accusing God and accusing Job. And again is coming in with looking for a way to create division, separation between God and man. That's what the enemy's always out to do, is create a separation. And if he can't get God to just accuse man, he'll get man to accuse God. And he wants to bring in that separation. And this time he's come in again. And again, God answers with the words. This is in chapter 2. And chapter 2, verse 3, and it says, again, God introducing Job to Satan again. He says, Job is a man who is a blameless and upright man, one who fears God and shuns evil. Still that testimony about the life of Job. Still he's got that opinion of Job, and that's wonderful. But this time he goes a little step further. He says, and still he holds fast to his integrity. And still he holds fast to his integrity. See, God wasn't unmindful of those things that Job was experiencing. He wasn't unmindful of the loss and of the heartache and of the pain. He wasn't unmindful of those. He wasn't oblivious. This just wasn't all happening in the background to God. God was aware of what was happening to Job. And he said this about him. And still he holds fast to his integrity. It's such an important line, that is his integrity. Really, our Christian walks and our walk with God should be one of integrity. I mean, I've said it before when I've preached in the church. Do we really believe that these things are real? Do we really believe that this is the word of God and that this is true? Do we really believe it, or do we just say it? See, to live with integrity means that we walk it out in our daily lives. That it is our default position. It isn't just running around in chaos and in worry and in fear and unbelief. It's to experience those things, yes, because we're human. Those come upon us. I mean, we've seen how Job was heartbroken, how he was devastated. And yet, God still said he holds fast to his integrity. He hadn't sinned. It said there in verse 22 of chapter 1, Job did not sin nor charge God with wrong. And then in chapter 2, verse 3, he says, and still he holds fast to his integrity. What a testimony. I pray that's our testimony. We've gone through this life and through all the things that we will experience, good, bad, ugly. whatever we'll experience, I pray that we'll get to that point when we see Christ face to face, that he'll say to us, well done, my good and faithful servant. You've walked with integrity. You've finished the race. Enter thou into thy rest. What a testimony to Job and to who he was and to what he had experienced. But now, as I said, this becomes all that more real. Those things that happened to Job up until this point, that happened outside of him, that happened to his livestock, his servants and his family. Yes, he had felt them very personally, but they'd still happened to him outside of his body. And now the enemy is given permission to touch his body. Now, we, again, as I said before, we've got to be careful when we're handling these things. But there's somehow the protection's been lifted off Job for some, and now the enemy is touching his body. He's striking him in his body. See, it isn't God who gives sickness. God never gives sickness. It's the enemy here who's given sickness and giving disease, and he strikes him in his body. It's actually interesting, and the verses there as we're heading into, and it says that he immediately went out of the presence of God. He immediately went out. In other, he was eager. He's seen this as an opportunity to really strike at Job's character, to really strike at his heart. Because he knows, and I know, and I'm sure you know yourself, anytime you're sick in your body, that really gets down to the nuts and bolts. It takes a whole nother level of faith to deal with an illness in our own bodies, to struggle on and to remain faithful and to remain diligent and to walk with integrity. Whenever our bodies are ill and sick, to believe that God is a good God and God is a big God and God's in control and we can trust him. It takes a whole nother level of faith when it's in our own bodies. And the enemy knew that, so he went out immediately from the presence of God to strike the person of Job. And strike him he did. Oh my, the things that went on in his body, the things that he experienced. Actually, if you look into the details of it, it talks about him being covered in boils from the crown of his head to the soles of his feet. It talks about him sitting in ashes, probably sitting in the dump, the local dump, where people would have taken their waste and would have burnt it. You could imagine him taking some waste out to there, some rubbish, throwing it into the fire, and then just collapsing in a heap, dejected, just totally dejected. And he's got these boils that have appeared all over his body. And to get a little bit of relief, he's scraping at them. His condition, it actually says that he had boils from head to toe. It actually talks in chapter 7 about him tossing all night in sleeplessness. They caused him discomfort. He got no rest, no matter which way he turned in his bed. He just got no rest, no peace from it at all. He talks later on. It also talks about him having broken skin and disgusting sores. He says, "I'm a loathsome. I'm disgusting." There was also probably weight loss involved. It talked about his bones cleaving to his skin, so he had lost weight. He had lost strength. This was devastating to him. I'm sure in some ways he thought maybe this is it. This is a life-altering condition. This is the life-limiting condition. He was just stricken in his body to such a degree. Horrendous. We think of people that we know and we love and we pray for in our fellowship who are sick in their bodies, who are facing hardships and challenges every day. I'm sure that as they read these passages, they can relate to this suffering. We can only grasp it in our imaginations, those of us who are in full health. But it's not easy whenever you have to face life with challenges in your body, when you become so aware of all those illnesses, every aching joint. Every night seems to last a lifetime. Every day seems to last a month. Forget the problems we're having with this quarantine that we're going under right now. If you could imagine, add on top of that, these illnesses, this disease that has stricken his body. He was facing something that is shocking, that is horrific in many ways. And here he is, he's sitting in the ashes. He's sitting with his garments in a mess, with ashes on his head from his loss of his children. And he's sitting there just feeling sorry for himself in some ways, I'm sure. And, understandably and rightly so. And it's at this moment that his wife decides to chirp up. That his wife comes along with another thing to say. Incidentally, the time when last moments we heard there from Satan in the presence of God, that was the last time we hear his voice in the book. But his accusation is now taken up by another voice, and it's the voice of Job's wife. And she comes along with another blow against him, another thing to hit him. Can you imagine going through all these things and your companion, your life companion, your wife is beside you, and you're expecting that little bit of support, that little bit of encouragement, and she's going to help carry you through and sustain you. And what we're meant to do, we're called to build each other up and to help each other in times of need and times of hardship. And she comes along in chapter 2 verse 9 and she says, "Do you still hold fast to your integrity? Curse God and die." And that's the words of the accuser. The accuser has just heard God say that Job still walks with integrity. So the accuser's come out and has stricken him in his body and has now got Job's wife jibing at him. Do you still hold fast to your integrity? My. See, sometimes those we love and sometimes those closest to us, unbeknownst to them, they don't know that they're saying it sometimes, but sometimes they're giving voice to what the enemy is doing. They're giving voice to the enemy's plans and schemes. And that's what she's done here. She has picked up the cry from the enemy, almost like Eve in the garden, who took the accusation from Satan and took it to heart and then passed it on. She then said, did God really say? Did God really say? It's the same thing here. Ruth, his wife is bringing the same accusation. Why do you still hold fast to your integrity? Curse God and die. My. Now things have really come home to roost. Job's facing it really on all sides. It's hitting him in his heart. It's hitting him in his ears, in his body. His family is gone, who he loves so much. His possessions are gone, which had sustained him so much. His servants. Now his wife has come against him. He faces it on every side. And Job's reply in verse 10, but he said to her, you speak as one of the foolish women speaks. Shall we indeed accept good from God, and shall we not accept adversity? Now, it wasn't God who had brought this adversity. It wasn't God who had brought this hardship. Job was obviously, as I said in the last video, he was unaware of these things. He accused God of taking away from him. And here he's saying, shall we not accept hardship from God? And it says the last words there in verse 10. Chapter 2, verse 10, it says, in all this Job did not sin with his lips. In all this Job did not sin with his lips. He had faced this adversity. He had faced this hardship. His wife had now come against him. And it says that he did not sin with his lips. That's an interesting turn of phrase. What was happening in his mind and in his heart? He didn't sin with his lips, but maybe the seeds had been planted for him to start to question and start to doubt. He was getting unsettled. He was rocked here to the core. Rocked to the very foundations of his life. He was definitely on a low ebb, but he didn't sin with his lips. We're told in the Bible to be angry but sin not. It's okay to pour out those emotions and pour out that anger and frustration, but not to sin. Not to accuse God of being evil, of doing evil, or to accuse God of being invisible. God doesn't exist, because God does exist. God knows exactly what's going on, and he knew exactly what Job was going through, and he knows exactly what we're going through. It's important that when we vent our frustration and our anger and all those things, emotions we're going through, that we remain with a good, clean heart before God. We can pour out our feelings and our emotions, but don't accuse God of being evil. Don't accuse God of being sinful or unjust. Maybe we don't have a full picture. We don't, as I said, Job doesn't know the full picture. He didn't know about what was happening in the spiritual realm. So we got to be very careful. In the next video that we'll look at, we'll go further when Job's companions come on the scene, and we'll look at them and how the discussion really opens up, and then we really hear what's on the heart of these men and of Job. I look forward to seeing you next time, and I hope you're enjoying these videos. I'm certainly enjoying the study anyway. Okay, God bless.